The downpour had arrived suddenly, a flimsy gray curtain torn open by the rattle of thunder over Montparnasse. Golden bulbs outside the cafes hissed in protest as rainwater seeped into their filaments, and umbrellas bobbed along the Boulevard Raspail like dark, battered mushrooms. Etienne Revel tucked his violin case beneath his coat, head bent, and splashed through ankle-deep gutters toward the metro. He had played 3 sets that evening at Le Georges Rouge, the kind of smoky basement joint that paid in coins, compliments, or cognac, depending on how many American tourists happened to be in town. Tonight there had been few. Etienne's fingers still tingled from the last, frenzied chorus of Tiger Rag, but the coins weighed light in his pocket. Rent was due, strings were fraying, and he had just been told that the orchestra at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées was replacing him with a saxophonist modern times. Monsieur, you understand. Sleet slashed sideways, so he decided to cut through the nearly deserted Rue Campagne Première. Outside the Deme, chairs were stacked, and a waiter cursed the sky. Etienne rounded the corner, head down, about to hop over a widening puddle, when something, or rather someone, slammed into him. For an instant, he saw only leather and brass, a flying helmet, a pair of goggles skewed across determined eyes, and a fur-trimmed jacket soaked dark at the shoulders. They tangled, slipped, and fell together in a graceless knot. Etienne's violin case skidded away, thudding against a lamppost. "Nom du chien!" he groaned, pushing himself upright. The apparition in leather sprang to her knees first. "Pardon. I was looking for a taxi, should have watched where I was going." Her accent was pure French countryside, light and bright like the clink of porcelain, yet she spoke with the authoritative crispness of a soldier. Etienne collected his hat from the gutter, squeezing out water. "No harm done, except possibly to my instrument." He nodded toward the case. She stood, rainwater streaming off her jacket tails, and offered a hand. "Ariane Duval." The name tickled something in his memory. Newspapers, perhaps? A photo of a woman beside a tiny biplane, captioned La Fauvette, the warbler, fastest woman above France. He'd skimmed the article between sets one afternoon, impressed but doubtful. Aviators belonged to the realm of Jules Verne and military parades. They did not materialize on Parisian sidewalks at 1 a.m. "Etienne Revel," he said, shaking the offered hand. Her grip was firm, pilot's grip, as though she intended to lift him bodily into the sky. He knelt to retrieve the violin. The case latch had popped. He swallowed and lifted the lid. Bridge intact, no cracks. Relief washed through him stronger than the rain. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Only my pride. And perhaps tomorrow morning my bones will lodge a complaint." He attempted a smile that probably looked more miserable than charming. Ariane glanced up and down the empty street. "No taxis. May I buy you a coffee to repay my clumsiness? There's an all-night place near the Gare Montparnasse." Etienne, who 10 minutes earlier had been counting centimes, nearly laughed. "I accept, with gratitude." They set off together under the naked streetlights. Ariane walked with long, decisive strides, helmet still fastened beneath her chin, goggles pushed to her forehead. She talked while they splashed along. She'd flown an exhibition in Le Bourget earlier that evening, demonstrating barrel rolls for investors. The storm had grounded her plane. She'd left the airfield hoping to find a friend's couch, but had underestimated the deluge. Etienne tried to match her pace and enthusiasm, though his shoes squelched like overcooked mushrooms. At the cafe, they shed their coats and steam rose around them. Ariane ordered 2 bowls of black coffee and croissants, resurrected from the morning's batch. Under electric light, her face resolved into sharp cheekbones, a fetching scattering of freckles, and eyes the color of the storm itself, restless gray, flecked with silver. "You're a violinist," she said between sips. I recognized the case. "Jazz violinist," he corrected, though the title felt fragile tonight, which is to say, a professional improviser of both notes and rent money. She laughed, the sound low and throaty, Better to improvise than to fly a straight, predictable line. My father never understood that. Your father is, the general, retired. He thinks flying is unladylike and dangerous, which is quite right on both counts. That is precisely why I adore it. She tore her croissant in half as though it were an enemy map. Etienne sensed an electricity crackling between them, something beyond caffeine. Still, he reminded himself that tonight was a collision of chance, nothing more. Tomorrow morning, she'd be back at the airfield, and he'd be haunting Montmartre's taverns, chasing tips. Ariane broke his reverie. Where do you play next? My calendar is currently as blank as this plate. He rotated the empty porcelain. But I rehearse most afternoons at a friend's studio in the Passage Brady, if no one else has claimed the space. Passage Brady, she repeated thoughtfully. That's near the Conservatoire, none. Near enough to borrow their reverb through the walls, he joked. She leaned forward. May I come listen tomorrow? Weather permitting, I'd like to repay more than coffee. Etienne's pulse tapped eighth notes in 4/4 time. Yes. 3 o'clock. 3. She stood, fastening goggles around her neck like a necklace. Merci, Monsieur Ravel. Until then. She stepped into the night, seizing the storm as though it were merely another element she could conquer with propeller and courage. Etienne sat there, staring at the door, suddenly aware that his clothes dripped onto the checkered floor, and that the ordinary world had tilted. The next afternoon, Paris emerged from its gray cocoon into a hesitant sunlight. Etienne tuned his violin beneath the skylight of Marcel's studio, a drafty loft perched above a spice merchant. Dust motes drifted like airborne dancers. He played a languid blues scale, stopping whenever the G string growled. At 3:05, he worried she had reconsidered. At 10 past, he worried she had never intended to come. At 12 past, propeller noise shivered the glass. He ran to the window. A motorcycle, black, sleek, roared into the alley. Irene dismounted in trousers and a leather jacket, hair braided tight against the wind. She climbed the stairway as though ascending a ladder to her cockpit. Pardon the delay, she said, breathless. A gendarme wished to debate whether ladies should pilot their own automobiles, let alone planes. And did you convince him? I outreasoned and outshouted him. Flaps down, full throttle. She smiled. Shall we play? For 2 hours, Etienne guided her through his small universe, the gypsy laments of Stéphane Grappelli, the ragtime pickups imported from Harlem, the minor key musette waltzes floating over the Seine at dawn. Ariane sat cross-legged on the creaking floorboards, eyes closed, hands tracing invisible flight paths in the air. Whenever he paused, she bombarded him with questions. Why does the blue note make me feel like the ground is slipping? How can a glissando resemble a spiral dive? Could you fit your whole solo into 30 seconds, the length of a loop-the-loop? He tried, she laughed, clapped, demanded an encore. It felt like playing to the horizon itself, vast and hungry. When the light turned amber, Ariane fetched 2 pastries from her satchel. They ate on the windowsill, watching pigeons drift lazy circuits above Boulevard Saint-Martin. Etienne, she said, voice softer than before. I have an idea. Next Saturday, I am scheduled to fly at the Festival de l'Aviation in Reims. They need music between demonstrations. The organizers want violin playing records, but imagine instead violin soaring with a plane. Playing in the air? In the hangar first, perhaps later, a short ride in the second cockpit. A mischievous spark lit her eyes. We could rehearse all week. I'll secure the fee, half for you, half for fuel. Etienne's mind flooded with objections. He owned no automobile, had no formal concert attire, feared heights, but above them all surged a fierce yes. I accept. She clapped once, decisive as a starter's pistol. Excellent. Meet me at Les Bourgets tomorrow at 10. They rehearsed dawn to dusk. Etienne stood in the echoing hangar, arc of corrugated steel above him. and let the squeal of wrenches, the scent of engine oil, fold into his phrases. Ariane would stride away mid solo to test a magneto, shouting again over her shoulder. By the fourth morning, she had choreographed a routine, his introductory cadenza timed with her engine's cough, a swing break accompanying her taxi, a frenetic tremolo as she lifted off. Workers paused to listen. A mechanic whistled harmony. Someone passed around a cap. Frank notes appeared. Etienne realized he was earning more than any Montmartre gig. On Friday, Ariane insisted he climb into the forward cockpit. I'm no acrobat, he protested. My stomach turns during elevator rides. I'll fly smooth, trust me. She tightened his harness. La Fauvette's propeller blurred. Wind hammered his cheeks, and suddenly the ground slid backward. Etienne's breath lodged somewhere near his bow tie. Paris flattened into a mosaic. Basilicas, boulevards, barges on the river like matchsticks. Then came the silence. Up here, engine noise diffused, leaving a muffled hush like backstage before curtains rise. Ariane banked gently, sunlight scattered across the wings. How do you like my music hall? She called through the speaking tube. He could only laugh, wild and wordless. Fear melted into wonder, wonder into a melody. He'd never played. He tapped it on his knee, minor sixth, perfect fourth, blue third. When they landed, he scrambled for his notebook. That's our finale, he declared. She grinned. Then Saturday we'd dazzle them. Opening day at Reims dawned crisp, the air smelling of wheat and kerosene, society ladies in cloche hats, mingled with veterans wearing rows of tarnished medals. Children waved tricolors, reporters brandished cameras, yet unease lurked beneath the pageantry, rumors of German rearmament, of fascists marching in Rome. War, once banished by armistice, was scribbling dark patterns along the horizon again. Before showtime, an official approached Ariane. Mademoiselle Duval, some patrons are concerned. A lady pilot is already an attraction, but to add a jazz musician, people might think the festival a circus. Ariane's nostrils flared. Etienne rested a hand on her sleeve. Perhaps a short demonstration, he suggested, will reassure them. She drew a breath, nodded. Together they stepped before the crowd. Etienne raised his violin. Ariane beckoned for silence. He launched into their opening cadenza, a swirl of double stops that echoed off hangar walls. The reluctance in the bleachers loosened. He switched to a jaunty swing phrase. Ariane started the engine on his downbeat. Propeller percussion clattered in time, and when La Fauvette rolled forward, the spectators leaned as if tugged by invisible strings. By the time the biplane lifted, cheers drowned the engine. Etienne's bow flashed under the sun. Ariane climbed, dipped a wing in salute, then circled back for a featherlight landing. The official wiped sweat from his collar. Proceed, he croaked. Proceed. They performed twice more that afternoon. When at last Ariane taxied to the hangar, Etienne ran alongside the wing, laughing, heedless of grease and dust. She cut the engine, tossed off her helmet, and vaulted down. Their hug was spontaneous, fierce, and widely photographed. That evening, the Reims Gazette printed the image, the warbler and her fiddler. Some saw romance, others scandal. Letters piled at the festival office, praise from schoolchildren, complaints from propriety leagues. Ariane shrugged. Air currents change, we keep flying. They returned to Paris triumphant. Gigs poured in. An engagement at the Casino de Paris, a radio broadcast with Radio Télévision Française. Etienne's landlord knocked politely instead of pounding. Yet success brought scrutiny. Ariane's father summoned her to the family estate in Amiens. I must go, she told Etienne, lacing boots. He will be furious, but I won't surrender the sky, nor will I let them clip your wings, he said. She kissed him, quick and fierce, as if sealing a pact. A week later, Etienne waited outside the Amiens train station, violin strapped across his back. The town smelled of damp stone and unresolved grief. The scars of 1918 still pitted walls. He rehearsed the speech he would deliver to General Duval. I love your daughter. Your disapproval cannot ground her. Music and flight share a purpose to prove humans can rise above mud and gunfire. General Duval opened the manor door himself, a stooped man with iron mustache, eyes like bayonets. He led Etienne to the library without greeting. Ariane stood by the window, cheeks flushed from argument. The general faced Etienne. You accompany my daughter in her stunts. Her achievements, monsieur. Call them what you like. They tempt fate and mock order. War taught me the price of frivolity. He gestured toward framed photographs of comrades in sepia uniform. France rebuilds on discipline, not jazz and daredevilry. Etienne sensed Ariane trembling. He answered carefully. War also taught the price of fear. Your daughter's courage inspires thousands. She reminds them that the sky still belongs to dreamers. The old soldier's jaw twitched. Dreams end when cannons speak. Another conflict is coming. Mark me. Then all the more reason, Etienne said, to fill the silence beforehand with music. Something flickered in the general's gaze. Pain, perhaps? He turned away, palms clasped behind back. If you must continue, he said finally, at least be prepared. From a drawer, he withdrew a small leather pouch. My air service compass carried it through Verdun. Now it is yours, Ariane. Ariane stepped forward, stunned. Papa, I will not forbid you, he said gruffly, but I will pray the compass guides you home. Later, outside under bare chestnut branches, Ariane leaned against Etienne. He never surrenders anything, she whispered. This feels like permission. Or a blessing, Etienne said. She slid the compass into his palm. Keep it with your violin. Music needs direction too. Monday, 1929 arrived with crisp mornings and anxious headlines. Market crashes in New York, riots in Berlin. At Le Bourget, foreign squadrons practiced maneuvers, and the talk among pilots shifted from prize money to payloads. Etienne and Ariane sensed the shadows lengthening, but they pressed on. A coast-to-coast tour, benefit concerts for veterans' hospitals, a New Year's Eve extravaganza atop the Eiffel Tower. On a frostbitten January night, Etienne waited on the Trocadero Esplanade while Ariane performed a beacon-guided flypast for dignitaries. Clouds obscured the moon, wind sharpened to a knife, spotlights swept aimlessly. Minutes stretched, engines droned, faded, returned, uncertain. Then came a sputter, a cough silence. Etienne's heart stalled. He clutched the general's compass, eyes scouring the black sky. A faint hum emerged low over the Seine. A lone biplane dipped perilously, landing gear skimming rooftop chimneys. But she held steady, missing masonry by inches, wheels finally kissing the floodplain grass beyond Pont d'Iéna. Etienne sprinted. By the time he reached the plane, Ariane had unstrapped herself, hands shaking. Carburetor icing, she gasped. Couldn't climb. He embraced her forehead against hers. The compass worked. No, she whispered. You did. Around them, sirens wailed, officials ran, but inside the circle of their arms was a calm beyond weather. And in that stillness, Etienne understood. Storms, wars, fashions, they would come. They would try to drown music, to ground flight, but so long as Ariane's pulse beat beneath his hands, so long as his bow could translate joy into sound, they would rise. Perhaps not high enough to escape every shadow, but high enough to glimpse dawn before others dared imagine it. He led her away from the damaged plane, violin case thumping against his knee, her goggles clinking against jacket buttons. Behind them, flashbulbs popped, history catching them in bright fragments. Ahead, the city waited, rain-slick and glimmering, as though the streets themselves were runways and staves, inviting wheels and notes to carve new patterns. Together they stepped forward, and the future, turbulent and luminous, unfolded like wings